Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to a bustling Formula One paddock here at the Circuit of the Americas, the location for the second of 3 races being hosted in America in 2023. Of course, we've already had the Miami Grand Prix, and in a few weeks' time we will be in Las Vegas for the very first time. But now it is all about qualifying. We're gearing up for the Power Hour here in Austin, Texas. And you might be thinking, hey, what? Wait a second, it's Friday. Yes, of course, it's another sprint weekend. So we're going to set the grid here this evening for Sunday's US Grand Prix. And I have to say, there is a lot of attention outside the Red Bull hospitality area here in the F1 paddock. Everybody desperate to catch a glimpse of the new 3-time world champion Max Verstappen. Of course, he took the title last time out in Qatar after the sprint race. So we're running back-to-back sprint race weekends. And he set off, as we'd expect, as the fastest here in the US as well. Fastest in FP1, and I'm sure that may be a trend we continue to see throughout the weekend here. As I say, it's a bustling paddock down here. Me, Rosanna Tennant, on the ground doing the hard graft in the hot temperatures, 35 degrees at the moment. And in the commentary box, it's former Formula One driver and lead commentator Jolyon Palmer, alongside the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. And we had a hectic FP1 session, Jolyon. I always say FP1, it's actually just FP, isn't it, on a sprint weekend? And it's so difficult to tell who's going to shake out where, because the teams are all running different strategies. We saw some people, the McLarens, avoiding the soft tyre entirely, other people on alternate strategies as well. So coming into qualifying, I mean, perhaps Max Verstappen is a nailed-on pole positioner, but anyone else that you've got your eye on?
I don't even think he's a nailed-on pole position. It was quite close in practice earlier on. It's also there's no aircon in the box, Rosanna. We've got the sun beating down on us. We have to shut the blinds so we can see anything. So we're all suffering through it this afternoon in Austin, and hopefully we'll suffer through a brilliant qualifying session, because it was pretty close between Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes earlier on, and there's the wild card of McLaren, who didn't run soft tyres in practice.
There was me thinking I was doing all the heavy lifting, but it's one team, one dream. I forget these things.
Of course, we're all in it together.
Absolutely. Andrew Benson, I'm sure you've been crunching the numbers since FP, and now we find ourselves at the beginning of the Power Hour, the qualifying session. Who stood out to you in that hour of running earlier on?
Well, it's a really intriguing session ahead of us, I think, Rosanna, and I think one of the things that caught my eye was Lewis Hamilton's final lap in the Mercedes. He was fastest of all in the first and second sectors. The lap went away from him in the final sector, and he lost a couple of tenths there and ended up third fastest. But and that's probably because his tyres had gone off because he'd overused them slightly in the first 2 sectors. But if he can get that balance right, you know, they've got an upgrade on that Mercedes. I'm really intrigued to see just how close to the front they can be. And of course, you've got the McLarens and the Ferraris to factor in alongside the Red Bulls as well. So, you know, of course, Verstappen's the favourite for pole, but there's a lot of intrigue ahead of us, I think, in this next hour. Yeah,
absolutely. Lots of headlines to keep across. And as you mentioned, Andrew, Mercedes bringing that revised floor, which their technical director, James Allison, says could bring them a tenth of a second. Lewis thinking it could be the biggest upgrade yet. George Russell playing it down somewhat on Media Day here at the Circuit of the Americas. Also joining us in the BBC commentary box this weekend is racing driver Alice Powell. Alice, I know you've had a keen eye on F1 Academy, one of the support series here this weekend, the all-female series. How's the track looking? Is it clearing up slightly? Because it was very dusty in the pit lane earlier, and I assume that kind of is the same out on track.
Yeah, it's certainly cleaned up quite a lot from when they were out at 8:15 this morning, and they've just had a session after the F1 free practice earlier. We have had some historics out on track. Whether they've dropped some oil, because often they usually do, a few have come back on trucks, but it certainly has made a difference that it's cleaned up a lot. However, if you just stray a little bit offline, quite a few of the drivers in F1 Academy were getting then severe snaps of oversteers. So there is really one line. So a lot of the drivers are going to try to make sure that when they do have to let somebody through, they're not going to stray too much onto the dirty part of the track. So hopefully they all keep it nice and safe and keep out of the way of each other. But it's dirty offline.
And you say there's only one line, but at Of course, track limits could play into things this evening. Jolyon, you expecting to see some times being lost this evening with the drivers getting a little too fast and furious?
Oh yeah, of course. It's 2023 and that is a feature of qualifying. But hey, the rules are the same for everyone. We saw a lot of laps going over track limits earlier. It didn't matter in practice, but they will be deleted if they abuse them in qualifying now.
Oh, they just can't keep it between those lines, can they, the Formula 1 drivers in 2023? Well, I tell you what, as I look up through the F1 paddock, so many people here trying to experience Formula 1. Of course, F1's fairly new in the US. The stands are packed, the general admission areas are packed as well. And we have, I think, got some cars on track. Q1 underway, qualifying, ready to set the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix here in the US. Jolyon, up to you.
Here we go then, 4 o'clock local time. It's another roasty, toasty qualifying hour coming up. 35 degrees out there, and we have 17 minutes, 17 seconds, 15 seconds, 14 seconds left on the clock in this Q1 already. Cars filtering out onto the circuit. Logan Sargeant, the first of them, the home hero, trying to get through into Q2 and trying to add some sort of emphasis to his claim to keep that Williams seat. We'll keep an eye on him in Q1. It's actually pretty difficult to get a read on who might be out. I guess the obvious candidate, Alice, would be Lance Stroll, who missed a lot of running earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for him in some ways because he didn't get much running. That's not his fault, but obviously we touched on, didn't we, in free practice, his sort of attitude hasn't been the greatest, so he'll be hoping to make improvements. Had a good qualifying here last year, 5th on the grid, which I think was his best of 2022, so it's not like he doesn't know the circuit, but obviously he did miss out on crucial running earlier on, so hopefully all those problems for Aston Martin are fixed. But I'm interested to see how the McLarens get on, because they didn't run the soft tyre when pretty much everybody else did, and we've seen track evolution can be quite great through, it doesn't matter what track you go to, so they'll be looking to hopefully be okay in terms of not ran that soft tyre. But Logan Sargeant, as you said, he's the first one coming round.
Yeah, it will be a step into the unknown for McLaren, for Fernando Alonso as well as Lance Stroll. They didn't run the soft tyres, and Alonso will be eager to make it into the top 10. Overcame early issues for his Aston Martin. He got 19 laps in this morning's running. Sargeant starts a flying lap, and this circuit also has been really tricky. The bumps have been a talking point after practice. A lot of drivers struggling with it. We heard Carlos Sainz talking about bouncing a huge amount, and Sargeant starting a flyer with a clear track ahead of him, Rosanna.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a query on that McLaren choice of not running the soft in FP1, guys. Can they extrapolate data from maybe other circuits that are kind of similar to the Circuit of the Americas, or is it not that simple?
Yeah, they've got plenty of data. They've also got sim running. The simulators are always constantly running back at base. So they will have had, I'm sure, I'm not entirely sure, who's their sim driver at McLaren? I can't think who it is.
They've got a load, haven't they?
Have they got a load? Yeah. So one of them would have been sat on the simulator, I'm sure, doing some soft tyre runs and feeding data back to the track, and then they would have done sort of a comparison. So yeah, in some ways, but it's not just that, it's for the drivers as well, about getting that feel. Feel is so important. You drive by the seat of your pants, essentially, so them not having that feel on the soft tyre, let's see if that affects them.
What it does do though, Jolene, isn't it, is it gives them a chance to get that feel in this first run. It gives them a bit more flexibility with the number of soft tyres they've got available for this session, whereas if you run one in practice, it's one less set, one less new set to run through qualifying, and that can be compromising.
Yeah, if you've got Q3 aspirations for the big teams, you might want to take a bit more of a risk if you're a Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari or the like, because you want to keep 2 sets back for a Q3 attack. So that's what McLaren have given themselves a better shot with. It's a risk, but they've got historic data as well, and for the big teams, Q1 should be a little bit more routine. Only the bottom 5 go out, and they've got plenty of pace in hand to stay above the likes of the AlphaTauris, Stroll, Williams cars, but a lot of those midfielders or lower end cars look quite competitive, including Haas earlier on as well. Both cars for the Haas team with upgrades on, and both in the top 10 earlier on. Logan Sargeant has come straight back into the pits after starting a flying lap. He's aborted one and come in. Bottas is at the top of the times ahead of Zhou, Gasly, Ocon and Stroll after the first flyers. Just 6 cars now with times on the board, because Lando Norris goes to the top 2 tenths quicker than Valtteri Bottas.
one thing we did see, didn't we, in free practice, is that when they went out there and they put in the fast time on that soft tyre, they all essentially did a cool down lap to just cool down the tyres a little bit, and then they went bang again, but no one really improved. Okay, we had Charles Leclerc that improved slightly in that first sector, but then they were all scrabbling for grip, weren't they? Especially when we saw George Russell. He was fighting the car on that second run, so it's going to be really important to try and make sure you extrapolate all of the grip and all of the time in that first run.
It's tricky though, because the temperature's so high, the soft tyres are overheating, and it's a really difficult circuit on the tyres. Anyway, it's like a lot of stress around this circuit. All the classic cars, there was a lot of spins earlier on. There was an Alan Jones Williams pointing the wrong way at turn 11, locked it up on the rear brakes. Wouldn't have fancied being that driver trying to explain why he'd been to vintage Williams, but other cars stopping. In Formula One practice, it was only really Oscar Piastri earlier that had a big moment on the grass. Everyone else was fairly clean, if there was just a few over the track limits excursions. Sergio Perez is on a flying lap here in the Red Bull, 3/10 down on his teammate earlier on, had a much better session in the top 4, and he's done the fastest middle sector in these early stages of Q1. Perez through the penultimate corner, got to stay within track limits, which he does. They've been a real issue for Checo this year, and he's clean through the final corner as well. Got to get that banker on the board, and he comes across the line, slots into 3rd place. So Leclerc now top of the times from Norris, from Perez. Those 3 separated by half a tenth. Then Piastri and Bottas a couple of tenths further back.
I have to say, Verstappen's on a lap which is looking like it's going to put him to the top of the times, but Charles Leclerc has been in impressive form today. He was a lot quicker than Carlos Sainz's teammate in the practice session, and he's again a lot quicker than Sainz, 6 tenths quicker than Sainz on that first run. So keep an eye on Leclerc as a potential threat to Verstappen.
He's a man that loves the sprint race format as well. Pole in Baku, double pole with the sprint as well. He was on great form in Austria, led the race briefly, and he was on it from the word go earlier on. Lewis Hamilton is the sound you can hear now, arcing his way downhill through the right-hander of turn 2. Flat out through 3, 4. These corners in the first sector come flying at you, and Hamilton is on it. Was a little bit wide of the apex in the first turn. He's 800ths down on Charles Leclerc on his opening gambit, and now he's scooping it up through the final part of the first sector at turns 8 and 9, over the bump, the biggest bump on the circuit at turn 10, hits the brakes for turn 11, the left-hander slowing it right down, still the rear axle right on the edge for Lewis all the way through the corner, and now he can stretch his legs on the straight. Accelerating through the gears, DRS open. The big stop now at turn 12 will await Hamilton, who was very quick earlier on in practice. Seemed a lot more comfortable with the Mercedes car than his teammate George Russell, who is 4 tenths down on Verstappen in the first sector. And Hamilton is up through the middle sector, 100th up on Max Verstappen.
Yeah, he lost it, didn't he, in the previous free practice. He lost it in that last sector, so it'll be interesting to see if he's checked the data. He's maybe changed a few little changes to the car, and he would gather it up in this final sector with 10 minutes now left to go. A snap of oversteer as he flies through turn 19. Let's see if that's lost him too much time. Hopefully for Hamilton it hasn't. Again, across the line now. Yeah, it did. Pops up into 5th place, nearly 3 tenths down from Verstappen.
He's struggling desperately for any sort of rear grip. That Mercedes looked twitchy from the first corner to the last. Russell with a lurid slide coming out of the final corner as well. Actually completes the lap and goes up to 3rd, so he's up on Hamilton by a tenth. But he is a tenth and a half down on Max Verstappen at the top of the times. Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Perez, Hamilton and Piastri, the top 7. In the bottom 5 at the moment, Albon, Hulkenberg, Sargent, Tsunoda and Ricciardo, none of which have lap times on the board, so they've left it a little bit longer, those guys. 9 minutes left on the clock.
I was just about to say, I wonder if that was Hamilton getting those soft tyres sort of screaming towards the end of that lap, but we've just seen a replay of him getting oversteer on the entry into turn 1 at the very start of the lap, so clearly struggling there as in comes Lance Stroll. The guns of the Aston Martins you can hear, and it was not the cleanest of tyre changes there.
More things going wrong for Stroll, who's the slowest of the 14 runners that have done a flying lap so far. Magnussen, Albon, Hulkenberg, Sargent, Tsunoda and Ricciardo, the 2 Haas cars, 2 Williams and 2 AlphaTauris yet to get on the board. As I say that, Albon through, up into 9th spot. That's a decent job from him in the Williams. Nearly made Q3 here last year, was quite quick earlier on. and he'll be happy to have a few cars behind him, ease the pressure for a second run, which everyone will get. 8 minutes left on the clock. Hulkenberg sliding out of the final corner, and he goes to the top of the times.
Hello, where did that come from? A very good middle sector. Kevin Magnussen is yet to cross the line, but wow, just over 2 tenths clear of Max Verstappen. I wonder if this is the track improving slightly, possibly. Magnussen's only 12th, so he doesn't really jump very high at all. So Nico Hulkenberg's really strung a lap together there, and actually Gasly is fastest now in the first sector.
The track's definitely cleaning up, but that is some lap from Hulkenberg. 2 tenths to the good of Max Verstappen, with everyone's going to have another set of soft tyres to come. There's 7.5 minutes to go. That's the San Daniel Ricciardo crossing the line, getting himself up into 14th place of 19 runners to do a time. Ocon screams it up to 3rd place. The time's really tumbling now as the track cleans up, and these guys taking a bit of benefit by running slightly later on this first set of tyres. Gasly, who's done the fastest first sector, completes the lap, and he goes quicker than Hulkenberg now. 700ths to the top of the times. Gasly ahead of Hulkenberg, and we have the first lap time deleted for track limits is Logan Sargent in the Williams.
Yeah, that's not what he needs, is it? That just then puts him under a little bit of pressure going into these final runs. And Zhou Guanyu as well, he's had a lap time deleted for track limits at turn 20. Sargent's was at turn 12. So they're popping in these lap times being deleted, and that the sound you can hear is Carlos Sainz as he winds it round to the final corner. Full throttle, and he's about to start a flying lap. He is currently sitting down in 18th place, but without any track limits, etc. I expect him to jump certainly into the top 5, which is where Charles Leclerc is now sitting in 5th.
He very much should do. Grand Prix winner this year, pole sitter this year as well at Monza. And Sainz dances his way through the high-speed sections 3, 4, 5, 6. The right-hander arcing your way back to the left-hander of 7. The corners coming thick and fast in the first sector. And Sainz is fast in the first sector. 2 tenths up on Pierre Gasly's session-topping time. The track is getting quicker and quicker. 6 minutes left on the board. It's looking like it might come down to the being right there on the final lap for these guys, the way the track is improving. We've got an Alpine at the top from a Haas. Sainz flying now as he stretches his legs down the back straight, under a bit of pressure in 18th, and we jump on board with him.
You can really see the bouncing as he's bouncing up and down. He stamps on the brakes into turn 12, gets it nicely into the apex, not abusing the track limits, and he's already 8 tenths up on Gasly there at the top of the time. So this has kind of surprised me, Jolien, at how this track is evolving. I didn't expect it to be this quickly.
This is huge track evolution, and I think that is why Gasly's now at the top from Hulkenberg. They're not suddenly front-running cars. You wouldn't have thought. The Sainz is about to blow them away with this lap. Got to stay within track limits. Leclerc has just pipped Gasly in the other Ferrari by 0.04 of a second. Sainz now squeezes on the throttle, runs to the line, which comes at him quickly, and he improves. Goes ahead of his teammate, 3 tenths to the good. Ferrari 1-2, 5 minutes left on the clock. That can ease a bit of pressure, but there are some big names that are a little bit further down. Norris 9th, Piastri 10th, Perez 11th, Hamilton 12th, all with a little buffer to the drop zone. Alonso 14th as well in the drop zone with 5 minutes to go. It's Albon, Magnussen, Ricciardo returning and down in 18th at the moment. Zhou and Sargent, who's yet to have a time on the board.
The sound you can hear is Carlos Sainz flowing it through 3, 4, 5 and 6. You can see the car still bouncing, sparks flying. He was really stringing the neck of his Ferrari and did a great job to push it up to the top of the time. So that now certainly does put those under pressure. You could even say that maybe the McLarens are slightly at risk too. By the time we have those sort of below them come out, Lewis Hamilton is included in that, and Fernando Alonso. You expect both of them, even Perez now, to jump up the time. So it's going to be quite a scrappy last 4 minutes of this session. And of course, track limits, that could come into play, as we're going to hear from Verstappen.
To update a cut-off, Max, we think your current lap time is on the bubble. That's 36.4, so you know what you have to do.
Wow. So he's in 5th, and they are thinking, yeah, you need to turn up the wick, you need to improve, which of course it's Max Verstappen, so he should do. Hope there's no commentator's curse there, but he should jump up the time. So if they're worried in being in 5th place, then certainly those behind need to be very worried.
Hey, it's 2 tenths down on the Haas of Nico Hulkenberg. So who is going to go out from this position? It's been a little bit quiet on the track because everyone is getting ready for their last laps, Rosanna.
As well as everyone has a little look at the screens up and down the paddock in the hospitality suites, and someone who's been watching over my shoulder is Otmar Zafnauer, of course, let go from Alpine a couple of months ago, so interesting to see him here. I wonder if he's lining up a business deal perhaps. And in terms of the conditions, we're lucky we're now in the shade in the F1 paddock. Obviously it's blisteringly hot elsewhere, but there is a little bit of a breeze, and we heard GP Gianpiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's engineer in FP1, telling Max about the wind, certainly up at turn 1, just to be mindful of tailwinds here. So another little factor for the drivers to deal with in this session.
Makes it very, very tricky, especially in the high-speed corners. Verstappen is on a flying lap, and he's just had to negotiate traffic as everyone was crawling out of the pit lane, coming through the fast corners. They dived out of the way pretty well, and Verstappen is 3 tenths up on Carlos Sainz through the first sector. That's a pretty big margin through just 6 corners. And now he comes over the crest of turn 9. We'll hit the brakes at turn 11, and we'll get a middle sector time coming up soon. Everyone else still on outlap, so Verstappen's gone a lap early, maybe just to try and be safe, but he's given himself a bit of traffic on this lap as well.
Yeah, they've run slightly out of sync with people, haven't they? And Perez is 3 tenths down really in the first sector to Verstappen, so he needs to try and find some time in that middle sector as Max now comes out of turn 12 into 13 and 14, which is where you said earlier is the very tricky section there as the tarmac changes as well going into 15. But he's not fastest in the middle sector is Max Verstappen, but it's certainly going to be enough, I would say, to boost him up certainly into the top 3 and likely at the top of the times.
Perez not finding huge chunks in the other Red Bull, currently sits 11th, 1.5 minutes left on the clock. This is the final lap for everyone in this Q1. Verstappen is going to finish it first as he accelerates out of the final corner and goes to the top. Half a second then clear of Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. The track getting better, but that's a pretty big lap time from Verstappen. Perez comes through and goes 3rd position, so he's 6 tenths down on Verstappen, but according to what Red Bull said to Max before, that should be safe enough for the Mexican as well. We jump aboard with Lewis Hamilton, down to 12th position, under a bit of pressure. As you said, Alice, you've got to be super careful with track limits as well in this stage. When you're in a quick car, you don't want to be going out doing something sloppy in Q1.
Yeah, he had a little bit of traffic there, but he's gone purple in that middle sector. He's strong in that middle sector, isn't he, Lewis? But the Mercedes just can't seem to hang on in this final sector. Again, a little bit of traffic in front of him as he goes out of 15 now. We've got this great long right-hander that's flat out, I would say quite easy flat out, in an F1 car as they then sweep downhill over the bumpy entry into 19. It's certainly much tidier, Jolyon, than it was on the previous run that he had. So as he comes across the line now, we'll see where that pips him up to. 2.5 tenths clear of Max Verstappen.
There we go, gauntlet laid down by Mercedes, and Hamilton is still right there. Albon currently in the drop zone, but he jumps all the way up to 8th place and joins Nico Hulkenberg there in the top 10 for now. That puts Alonso down into 15th, and Fernando Alonso is just starting a final flying lap now before the checkered flag has come out, which it has done. So that was very marginal for Alonso to get a lap in. Tsunoda, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Zhou and Sargent all in the drop zone. As I say that, Sargent jumps up to 14th, gets himself out for now, but everyone behind him is improving.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's safe for Sargent as Lando Norris goes up just a slither off Lewis Hamilton, so he's very safe, but Ricciardo is on a personal best. Guan Yu Zhou is, Magnussen, so yeah, there we go, up goes Zhou, great lap time into P6, Sargent at risk, and I expect, unfortunately for him, he's going to be bipped out and out of the top 15.
That's the voice of Alice Powell alongside me, Jolyon Palmer and Andrew Benson for this qualifying hour. Daniel Ricciardo comes through and goes into 10th, immediately deposed to 11th as Magnussen jumps up. Loads of the slower runners jumping up and finding time. Russell has done a lap and is in 11th, might get shuffled well down. Piastri in the McLaren started at the front at the sprint last time out. It's down in 18th position as Tsunoda goes up to 5th place. The track evolution is causing chaos, with so many of the slower runners traditionally finding huge heaps of time. Piastri comes through, gets safe, up into 10th position. We look further down, Esteban Ocon now down in 17th in the Alpine, and both Aston Martins in the drop zone. Stroll and Fernando Alonso both trying to find a bit of time. Stroll's not on a great lap though, and might find himself in big trouble. Alonso is going to come through. Stroll out in 18th position, Alonso out in 17th position. Both Aston Martins crash out in Q1. Hulkenberg, after the heroics of going top earlier on, has also gone. He didn't improve right at the death. And Alex Albon also falls foul with Logan Sargent. So both Williams have gone, both Aston Martins have gone. And probably the biggest shock in the end there was actually Nico Hulkenberg, who was rapid on the first run and didn't find any pace thereafter. 5 exodus from Q1.
Yeah, but it's so close, isn't it? Between let's include Carlos Sainz there. He's 7/10 off Lewis Hamilton at the top, and then you go down all the way down to even Albon. Let's go to Albon. He's 1.2 off. That's how close it is. Half a second separating P4 Carlos Sainz down to Alex Albon in 18th. So times are close. We've got a really good battle. Well, I'll tell you what, we've got a good battle for pole, potentially. Not only that, we've also got a really good midfield battle.
Both cars out.
I would probably say that's probably music to his ears, both cars out.
Well, it's better than just him being out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
He'd probably know as well, when you've done an average lap, he improved at the end. Lance, he's 3 tenths down on his teammate, but at least this time his teammate's not right up there in the top field, and there's a second between them. It's a little bit closer, but it is miserable for Aston Martin.
Well, they've got an upgrade this weekend, Jolene, as well. They're trying to fix a problem. They've sort of introduced some issues into that car. It was so strong in the first sort of 8 or so races of the year, and they've kind of lost their way ever since. And to come to Austin with an upgrade on the car and have the cars qualify 17th and 19th.
Okay, we got knocked out, Nico.
That's Nico Hulkenberg expressing his frustration with a swear word, and then what you didn't see was him banging the steering wheel as well. But I would imagine there's going to be a banging steering wheels going on, at least metaphorically, at Aston Martin, because what on earth has happened there?
That is a nightmare scenario.
Terrible, man.
That was pretty self-explanatory from Logan Sargent. Terrible. He will start last tomorrow, half a second away from his teammate. We're getting a replay of Logan through the final couple of corners. Into turn 19, big snap of oversteer. He saved it and kept within track limits remarkably, but would have lost a heap of time there. So Sargent out, Albon out. Big disappointment as well for Williams there. But when the other cars, when the field is so tight like that, there's no real back end. It's incredibly close. Someone's got to lose out. Hulkenberg, I think, is the big shock in all of that. Magnussen up there in 7th place, and Hulkenberg down in 16th. So real surprise there, Rosanna.
Yeah, real surprise, and I think Aston Martin will be particularly disappointed, as Andrew said, bringing upgrades this weekend. And their technical director, Dan Fallows, in the lead-up to this weekend here in the US, was saying that if they could get everything right, they would be reasonably competitive. Of course, they had that brake temperature issue.
We're just keeping on track limits for everybody else.
Fernando Alonso being told to stay in the car. So yes, still expecting some track limit violations perhaps to come up on the notice boards. But of course, this is also a critical time for them because they're bringing upgrades to the car, but this is also helping next year's car. So if they can't get it right here, does this mean they're going to be on the back foot for 2024 after starting so strongly in this season?
Aston Martin have been, to me, a real disappointment of the year in the end, because I think because of the hope that everyone got from them in pre-season testing, flew out of the blocks. Alonso topped the first sessions of the year in Bahrain in the practices, and then they had this chance with the wind tunnel time, CFD time, to develop their car more than their rivals as well because of their low position in the Constructors' Championship last year, and yet they've been really outdeveloped, and when they did such a big step forward, they seem to be just taking loads of incremental steps back again.
Well, I think it's going to raise even wider questions than that. If you go back, you look at what happened. They introduced 2 new technical chiefs in sort of early part of last year. One of them was Dan Fallows, as Rosanna mentioned. He came from Red Bull, and he would have left Red Bull at a time when he would have an idea of what their 2022 car was like. So at the beginning of this year, a lot of people, the Aston Martin doesn't look the same as the Rebel, but it's got some differences in it. But it's a similar philosophy to the Rebel, like nearly every car on the grid is now. But earlier in the year, I did hear people saying, well, you know, it's all very well to turn up with a car that's a copy of last year's Rebel. How are they going to get on when they actually need to add some development to that? And I think those questions are just going to get louder within the paddock and within the team themselves. I think if they can't verify these upgrades in the next couple of races, it's going to be a bit of there's going to be a confidence issue there as well as they head into the winter developing next year. Are they on the right track? What's gone wrong? Why has it gone wrong? Something's not quite working out, obviously, inside that team.
Yeah, there's going to be big questions asked. Lance Stroll out there for the 5th consecutive time in Q1. We said at the start of the session there it was always going to be tough. Just 5 laps on the board for him in practice earlier on. And getting 3/10 away from Alonso is an okay achievement for him, but he'd have hoped that the whole Aston Martin package was a lot more competitive there. So a lot of work to go. And Stroll, you mentioned earlier, Alice, best qualifying of the year last year for him, 7th on the grid. They were fighting well up in the points. This time they'll start the race from 17th and 19th. And Alonso can get out the car now because no one had a lap time deleted at the end of the track limits apart from Nico Hülkenberg, who was already out and didn't improve on his final lap. So I wonder if that was Hülkenberg making a mistake there on the final lap and not quite hooking it up. As we get green light for Q2, cars filtering out, and we go again.
We do. Hamilton going towards the end of the pit lane, going very, very slowly, trying to get a gap from the car in front. Can't quite make out who that is. So they're all coming out of the pit lane now, but Lewis is pretty. He must be pretty happy with that, to be honest. George maybe not so much down in 14th place, but I don't want to jinx it, but I think we've got a nice scrap for pole position here. Yeah,
Lando Norris got right up there on the final lap as well in the McLaren. So Hamilton, Norris, Verstappen was the top 3 in the end, separated by a couple of tenths. Hamilton and Norris separated by just 1/10 in the end. 2 Brits at the top. We know Verstappen is surely favourite in everything 2023. You wouldn't put it past him, but he certainly looks like he's got a fight on his hands. And Hamilton is always rapid at this circuit. He's always gone well here. He's taken some dramatic victories. And there's a big gap between himself and Russell as well. George Russell only has 700ths between him and the drop zone at the end of Q1. Snuck through in 14th, but he's got a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, he has. So he's not particularly happy with how it's panned out here, and he didn't have a bad race last year. He tipped Carlos Sainz into a spin, didn't he, at the first corner? Got a 5-second penalty, but that didn't necessarily affect his result. So, but Lewis, as you said, he's scored some great podiums here. Never really been off the podium or bar one race. I think it was 2013. So he's done a great job.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to Toto Wolff, team principal at Mercedes, who's back after a couple of weekends away having a knee operation. He was saying that, yeah, okay, the lap time was competitive that Lewis was able to post in FP1 earlier on, but they are very quick and eager to say, you know, the car is not suddenly super fast because they've brought an upgraded floor this weekend. But there are areas that Lewis is feeling more comfortable in. But he did say that George, on the other hand, wasn't satisfied with how the car was going for him. So perhaps a difficult start to the weekend for George. And it's all about that confidence, isn't it? George always using that word, that since the summer break he has felt more confident, but he needs that confidence going into a weekend like this. Such a tricky one to get right with that one practice session.
Yeah, it is, and he didn't start particularly quickly in that practice. He's got another chance, though. The slate is wiped clean. We had 12 minutes left on the clock, and now 11 minutes 56, 55, 54. As Charles Leclerc sweeps his way through the first sector in the Ferrari. Another man, you say, could be in the mix. Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen, and Norris, all very, very quick. Carlos Sainz was quick at the end of Q1 as well. Looks pretty open this session so far. And track limits, remarkably, not a major issue in Q1. Everyone keeping their noses fairly clean. So we didn't have any of the Qatar debacle or the Austria one where it's even more dramatic than that. Here we go on board with Leclerc. Down towards turn 12. Tricky corner, left-hander at the end of the long straight. That's caused a lot of drama so far. Oversteering wide. A lot of drivers in practice, but Leclerc's through there okay on a set of soft tyres. Yeah. Oversteering into 15 though.
He does. He's got a little bit of traffic in front of him, but they good job of getting out of his way. someone has nipped the fastest first sector from him, and that is Lando Norris. So he's on a flyer as well as he comes through to Charles Leclerc to finish the lap, goes across the line. Of course, he will go to the top of the times, the first person to set a real lap time, but I expected it to be a little bit faster.
So he's on used tyres, Alice, as is Sainz, as is Hamilton, as is Verstappen, but Norris is on new tyres, so expect Norris fastest on this first run.
And that'll be why Norris will be the fastest man through the first sector. Piastri is now the fastest man in the middle sector. So McLaren, this is where they're playing their set of soft tyres joker that they saved earlier on in practice then, to give themselves a bit of a buffer on this first run of Q2. And Russell now goes to the top of the times, 200s up on Hamilton, and then Leclerc and Sainz on used tyres. Verstappen up on those guys as well. Gasly flying in the Alpine. Both Alpines still running in this and have looked quick at times as well. I think everyone must have been so caught out with that track evolution in that Q1. You expect it sometimes in the desert where dust and sand gets swept onto the track, but we've had a couple of sessions in the between practice and qualifying, and that was quite something there.
Yeah, it was, as Lando Norris has got his lap time deleted. But I wonder if this track evolution is going to continue, because you would then technically want to be the last car to set your lap time. You want to be the back of the queue, so the rest of the cars clear the track for you. But then you've got that risk of a yellow flag, a red flag. If you make a mistake, you might not get that extra lap. But Gasly, he's going to be one of the last ones really to cross the line, and he jumps up into P3, so a good job by him, and just over 1/10 away from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, good lap from Pierre Gasly. New tyres on the Alpine. Sergio Perez now trying to get onto terms with his teammate. Verstappen at the top from Piastri, Gasly, Russell and Hamilton in the early stages of Q2. Perez quarter of a second down on Verstappen through a couple of sectors. Arcs wide through the right-hander of turn 14, opens up 15. It's a difficult exit. You've got to get the power down in a straight line. We've seen so many oversteering moments as the soft tyres overheat in this Texan sun. 2 corners to go for Perez, the track limits corner of turn 19. Everyone's been a lot cleaner through the final corner so far, and Perez drives to the line now in the other Red Bull. One is at the top in the hands of Verstappen and in the hands of Sergio Perez. The other one slots into 5th place, but he's within 2/10 of his teammate. Again, the time's so close at this stage.
For such a long track, because it is a long track. Okay, it's 5.5 kilometres long, but there's a lot of corners, 20 corners. It's actually pretty close, isn't it? Like you said, Perez, okay, he's down in 5th place, but he's just under 2/10 off Max Verstappen. So it's going to be, I'll tell you what, it's going to be a crunch time, and it's going to be close to know who's going to be in that drop zone, as we're going to catch a replay of Carlos Sainz, who's just scrabbling for grip. Is he going to get held up by a little bit of traffic? Maybe.
Yes, Tsunoda didn't get out of the way in turn 15. He forced me over line. Okay. Should be okay. He should flag that. Yeah, we have flagged him.
Sainz dobbing in Tsunoda then. It looked marginal coming through 15, but obviously Carlos thinking from the wheel he had to take a suboptimal line into the tricky left-hander, and Tsunoda will face the wrath of the stewards, no doubt, now, after Sainz gets on the radio. The race control listening into all of those messages, and they will duly investigate, and that could be a 3-place penalty for Tsunoda, who's done a good job so far. Was up in the top 10 in Q1. He's up there in 8th after the first runs of Q2. We're in a lull in the middle of the session now. 7 minutes left on the clock. Ricciardo, Magnussen, Zhou, Sainz and Norris in the drop zone. Norris lost his lap time with being deleted for track limits. Sainz was on used tyres and felt he was impeded by Tsunoda. And they've got to dig out a decent lap here. And as you say, Alice, ran such a long lap, 5.5 kilometres. Some fast parts, some really slow parts and technical parts. All different cars in this field as well. Plenty of different cars still in the field. And they've managed to wind up the whole pack separated by less than a second at this stage.
I think that's impressive because, like you said, it's technical. There's so many. You've got slow corners, you've got fast corners, you've got combined corners, you've got especially that tricky sector 1. So it's very close. It's definitely closer than I expected. And also, it's a packed grandstand. The grandstands are really packed here. I know that talk before the Grand Prix, they were saying it could sort of break Silverstone's record of the most attendance this year. So we'll have to see.
Was heaving coming in this morning. Couldn't believe it was Friday in Austin. Been here for many years, but the F1 fever is really taking off in this circuit. The crowd love it. They're really passionate fans. And myself and Rosanna mooched through them at lunchtime, and they were just absolutely loving the fever in 35-degree heat, embracing it. And with the sprint format, they're getting some decent, juicy action on a Friday.
Yeah, they certainly are. It's even this morning when I came in at 6:30, I was queuing to get into. I was late because I was queuing to get into the circuit. I was thinking, action doesn't start for another 2 hours. What are you all arriving at? 6:30, there was traffic.
Dedication from you as well, doing the prep.
Yeah, I got traffic. Completely put me off. Yeah, he had a plenty big enough gap ahead of him. He just got too close in the corner.
Yep, understood. We're on it.
Okay, so that was Lando Norris saying he had traffic, and he duly went off on that corner with track limits. So that's the way he got his lap time deleted. It wasn't actually a particularly quick lap time that was deleted. Would have been good enough for only 12th place. I think it looked like it was a Red Bull.
It looked like, but he clobbered the curb, didn't he? So he was maybe sort of slightly put off. But the Red Bull was around the corner, I would say, going by the time he clobbered the curb, and he was offline. So
it's a tenuous one, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of frustration building there from Lando. We saw a little bit of that last time out in Qatar. So again, we've said it's a battle to watch as the Papaya fans got their cowboy hats on and their orange t-shirts, waving to the crowd. As we've got more cars on track, but not very much time left on the clock. Just over 4 minutes remaining.
One flying lap then for everyone to book their place into Q3 for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Sprint day tomorrow, of course, a sprint shootout qualifying, and then the dedicated sprint race tomorrow afternoon. This is all setting the grid for Sunday's US Grand Prix, and 10 of these 15 drivers will carry on into Q3 and duke it out for pole position in a few moments' time. But 3 minutes and 41, 40 seconds left on the clock as Charles Leclerc cruises, going very gently on this outlap to the final corner. It's very, very slow. They're really, really being careful about those soft tyres, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, but they've got a maximum delta time that they need to follow. And we've had a few from the last part of qualifying. Tsunoda, Ricciardo and Stroll are being investigated after the session. But now across the line comes Charles Leclerc as he heads down, sparks flying, DRS wide open as he stamps on the brakes into turn 1. He has a neat exit there. Again, more sparks and more bouncing from the Ferraris. It goes through this very fast 3, 4 into 5, then into 6. And he goes through, you can really see how the car is leaning, but it looks all tidy for now.
It looks a particularly harsh ride, I'd say, the Ferrari. Both of their drivers are under a bit of pressure. Charles Leclerc in 9th place currently. Carlos Sainz blaming a bit of traffic for his 14th place position. Yuki Tsunoda possibly having a little infringement there on the first run. So that'll be investigated later on. But for now, Sainz and Leclerc in the two Ferraris have got to get themselves up into Q3, because right now, if they don't improve, they'll probably be out in the case of Leclerc. They'll definitely be out in the case of Sainz. But Sainz has done the fastest first sector of the session so far. Just 6 thousandths clear of Leclerc. The track's still getting better and better. Other drivers filtering out of the pits. It's just the two Ferraris on a flyer. We jump on board with Charles Leclerc, who's on the fastest middle sector now, a 10th and a half up on Max Verstappen, weaving his way through the turns 13 and 14 before decelerating for turn 15. Tyres starting to overheat on the rear, flat out now, full throttle, bury through 16, 17, 18. Again, the Ferrari looks really, really twitchy over the bumps, but Leclerc keeps it pinned as he enters turn 19. One more corner to go. It's looking clean so far, it's looking quick, and Leclerc currently in 9th position will surely jump up and book his place through. Yes, he does. 1 minute 35.004. Leclerc goes to the top of the times, and Sainz possibly going with him, probably going with him as we join the Spaniard 2 corners from home. Right up to the apex, looking neat and tidy for Carlos. Leclerc at the top, half a second clear of Verstappen. Everyone else with laps to come in just a moment's time, but the second Ferrari goes second position. Ferrari 1-2, 3 tenths between them.
Yeah, that's a a bigger gap than I expected between Leclerc and Sainz. Max Verstappen, of course, is now fastest in the first sector, but he's not fastest in that middle sector. Lewis Hamilton still keeps that at the moment, so we'll keep a close eye. But Yuki Tsunoda, he's now charging down the back straight as well, closely followed by Zhou.
Final laps, and we've got Bottas, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Zhou and Lando Norris in the drop zone. Norris has to get a time on the board. He's not especially quick through the first couple of seconds. He's not actually going quicker than he did on the lap that got deleted, but crucially he's got to get a time on the board, and he made a mistake in that final sector, which is where he's at now. Norris, currently 15th, has to jump up. We've dumped Tsunoda into the bottom 5 for now, and he does jump up. 4th place for Lando Norris, showing a bit more pace in that McLaren. That was actually half a second quicker than his earlier lap. So Hamilton now on the bubble in 10th, Russell there in 9th, the 2 Mercedes under pressure. Magnussen goes out, 12th place for Magnussen. The second Haas will go out of this session. Tsunoda, Bottas, Ricciardo and Zhou all need to find something on this last lap.
Yeah, Zhou was very close on the track limits bubble there in turn 19. Verstappen, 0.004 of a second off Charles Leclerc, so he'll end this session as it stands P2.
Zhou jumps up to 9th, Tsunoda goes to 9th now, drops Zhou to 10th, then Russell and Hamilton 11th and 12th, and Russell's not on a fantastic lap. Hamilton is, he's the fastest man in the first sector, he's done a personal best in the middle sector, and Russell's in trouble. He is in trouble, he's down on Zhou through 2 sectors, so the man that only just got into Q2 is under big pressure to make it through into Q3. Gasly, great lap from him, up into 5th position. Hamilton washing very, very wide in the final corner, keeps it within track limits, and his earlier part of the lap was good enough to still get him through up into 3rd position. Great lap from him. But what about George Russell through the final corner for the other Brit in the Mercedes? He's clean through there, but is it good enough? It is. Up into 9th place for now. Tsunoda out in 11th. Perez now on the bubble in 10th.
Yeah, Perez, I think that's pretty much it. Is there really anyone behind him? No, that's it. So Perez has just scraped through as Ocon now pops up into P5. So that's a solid job by the Alpines, but they were pretty much the last cars to go across the line. So I wonder if that's sort of gone in their favour.
Yeah, they've certainly got a lot of pace, haven't they? Gasly came through and did a great job. Ocon's there as well, 4 tenths away from Leclerc, who's the fastest man. And, well, George Russell squeezing through. Sergio Perez squeezing through as well. I don't think he went for a lap at the end, Perez, and he just managed to make it through. 18 thousandths ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. So in that part, we lost Tsunoda, Zhou, Bottas, Magnussen and Ricciardo. Probably the predictable 5 from that session, but it was anything but predictable with the how close the times were. 18 thousandths Tsunoda to Perez, 19 thousandths Zhou to Perez. Super tight out there, and so close at the front, 4 thousandths between Leclerc and Verstappen. This is anyone's game.
It is. There's a couple of things to say about this session, I think. So Daniel Ricciardo's return has not gone that well, I would say. He's been 2 or 3 tenths off Yuki Tsunoda most of the day. I think he would be expected to be closer than that, and he's had a track limits time deleted as well. So where does that put him actually, Alice?
It was
still slow.
Yeah,
it was not a great lap, okay, but he still got a lap time taken off him.
Not great. And then up at the front, Charles Leclerc pipping Max Verstappen by 4 thousandths on that lap there. He's been a lot more comfortable in that Ferrari since they put a new floor on it in Japan. It's enabled him to set the car up with a little bit more oversteer, which is what he likes. Whereas before, because the car's been so nervous and unpredictable, they'd had to dial some understeer, which he hates, which is why he had that little sort of faded patch in the sort of early part of the second part of the season after the summer break, or at least I think that's what he would say. As I was saying at the beginning of the session, he looks like a real contender, and Hamilton, he just doesn't seem to quite be able to get that balance between the first 2 sectors and the last sector, does he? If he can do that, maybe it's not possible. If he can, maybe he can creep into that battle as well.
Yeah, we joined him at the end of that last lap that he did, and he would look like he was going off at the final corner. He carries so much speed into it, washed full of understeer. Every time we've seen Hamilton on track, he's been fighting the rear end. So certainly finely balanced on both axles, and he's enjoying his time here so far, Lewis Hamilton. He's not quite on terms in that part with Verstappen or Leclerc. Certainly looks a 3-car battle for pole position. Norris in the McLaren a little bit further adrift. Ocon as well in the Alpine, they'll be very happy. And we're nearly ready for Q3, Rosanna.
Certainly are. I have to say, I was listening in to the radio of Daniel Ricciardo, of course, back in the AlphaTauri for this weekend. He hasn't done a qualifying session for quite some time now, of course, breaking his hand in Zandvoort a couple of months ago. He was being coached over the radio by his engineer, telling him where he needed to brake in comparison to Yuki Tsunoda. So that's got to be a bit galling, hasn't it? Especially as Tsunoda's qualified P11, knocking on the door of points come Sunday afternoon's Grand Prix, and Ricciardo down in 15th. Okay, he's been on the sidelines for a bit, but you'd kind of expect him to be a little closer, and definitely not being coached by his engineer to sort of improve things to match up to Yuki Tsunoda.
That metacarpal brake for Ricciardo in Zandvoort practice, fairly innocuous crash, held onto the wheel, snapped a bone in his hand, and that might really hurt his chances in this, because it gave Liam Lawson a chance to showcase his talent against Yuki Tsunoda. And there was always a question, has Tsunoda really upped his game this year after being put in the shade by Gasly for the last couple of seasons, dispatched of De Vries? Ricciardo came in, did a solid job for a couple of races, but Lawson as a rookie came in and was right there actually with Tsunoda as well. So what do you reckon? That must give Daniel Ricciardo a bit more of a headache.
It's an interesting thing going into next year, isn't it? Because they've already confirmed Ricciardo as the race driver for 2024, which, I mean, when it happened, it was like, well, why do you need to do this now? Yeah. But they did, and he has got to get up onto the pace. I don't think they won't change anything now before the start of next year. But that little sort of triumvirate of Perez, Ricciardo, Lawson within the sort of other two Red Bull cars, if you like, it's really interesting because, you know, with Perez under threat for not performing compared to Verstappen, people are talking about, you know, is Ricciardo there as a potential replacement for Perez? Well, not on this form, but Lawson potentially could be.
Why do you think they did announce Ricciardo so early and Tsunoda when they had time? They had three drivers for two seats. Why didn't they just use all the time available and decide afterwards?
I don't know the answer. I'm sorry.
You know everything.
You knew everything, Benny.
It's certainly an odd decision. I wonder if that was part of the agreement for Ricciardo, that he'd be on the grid if he came back for half a season, just as a bit of security to come back and make the effort, get training again, and show up and give his best, not just for 8, 9, 10 races, that he'd have a bit of security of a season and a half, find his mojo again.
Yeah, well, that's the open question about Ricciardo, isn't it? Is he going to be able to get back to Red Bull Renault type Ricciardo, or is he always going to be McLaren Ricciardo, which is like a couple of tenths off Norris when he was there? And we don't actually know the answer to that question yet, and it looks like it's going to take a bit longer before we get a definitive one.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't stick Lawson in, because he did a good job. I thought he did a really good job in tough conditions. We said it again, didn't we, in free practice. But, you know, it's maybe they've just gone with the experience of Daniel Ricciardo.
It's an odd one, isn't it? Because logically, it's the exciting prospect, the rookie that came in and did a decent job. You'd like to see them, but at the same time, you've got Daniel Ricciardo, charismatic 8-time Grand Prix winner. He's a fan's favourite to come back on the grid as well. So it's not a bad problem that Red Bull have, but it's a tricky dilemma between them. Rosanna, you've been listening in to the Aston Martins, disappointed after Q1.
Yeah.
What were they saying?
Yeah, definitely. Lance Stroll finishing off his interview with the F1 team, saying that actually there is still opportunity come Sunday afternoon's Grand Prix. But Fernando Alonso, on the other hand, saying I was put out at the wrong time. I was too close to the car in front for my lap. And he said, we just need to go back and start this whole day again. Of course, they had brake temperature issues in FP1. Lance Stroll exiting the session prematurely in FP1 so the mechanics could work on the car. Fernando managing to get out. But of course, they've got this upgrade. They're desperately trying to learn about it. Always difficult bringing an upgrade to a sprint weekend because you are limited on track running and altering the setup, etc. But you could see from Fernando Alonso's body language that he was irritated, playing with his towel, rearranging his cap. You could see he wanted to get out of the interview situation. But yeah, frustrating times for Aston Martin after, as we said earlier on in the session, it had started so well 2023 for them.
Yeah, dropping away so quickly. Didn't realise you're a body language expert, Rosanna.
Watch out, Jolyon, watch out. Tonight at dinner, I'm going to be all over it.
I can't hide my true thoughts now.
Oh, no.
Gotta be careful around Rosanna Tennant.
I know what you're thinking.
Here we go, 11 and a half minutes left on the clock with 30 seconds into Q3, and the 5 teams, 10 drivers are funneling out of the pit lane. So we've got 2 Ferraris, 2 Red Bulls, 2 Mercedes, 2 McLarens, 2 Alpines in this one. Your team, Alice?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised that they were popped up there in the top 10 when I spoke to them earlier. They were, pretty disappointed with free practice, but maybe the evolution of this track has started to suit them a little bit better, and the drivers have done a great job to pop up into the top 10 there. Lewis Hamilton's waiting for the traffic to clear as the tyre warmers come off, and he exits the pit lane, but he's going to get stuck behind, I would say, a Red Bull. Yes, and that is Sergio Perez.
Alpine no doubt boosted by a consortium of superstars that have invested in their team. It was news this week. All sorts of sports stars that were unveiled as to have a little share in the Alpine team now. Juan Mata was a weird one in all of that. There was some big names. Rory McIlroy. There was Trent Alexander-Arnold.
AJ.
There was Anthony Joshua, all the big names. Juan Mata, Spanish international footballer, why not? Got in there as well. Have you seen them around Enstone?
I haven't, no, not seen them. I think AJ's coming this weekend. I think he's going to be around on Sunday. He's going to be sort of in the garage. So
Patrick Mahomes as well, reaching into America. You haven't seen them? No, they're not cruising around the Oxfordshire villages.
No, they're not. They're staying away.
They'll come to the glamorous events. We'll get AJ this weekend, then he's coming to Austin, and he's going to see 2 Alpines starting in the top 10, which is already a bonus considering where they've been recently. But how high can they get? How high can anyone else get? Can anyone stop Max Verstappen making it 3 poles in a row? It is the Dutchman, the first car on a flying lap now, launching it through the first sector, up the hill, over the crest, bouncing his way out of turn 9, arcing flat out through turn 10 before the first of 2 big stops. First one at 11, over another bump around this difficult, bouncy circuit. And Verstappen is the fastest man through the first sector. He's 10th and a half up on Charles Leclerc. Norris a long way back in the McLaren. Doesn't look like he's got the medal to fight for it just yet. But Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, all super close earlier on as Verstappen hits the brakes, slows down through the tight left-hander at 12. He'll arc his way around Lewis Hamilton, still on an outlap, and 1 sector to go for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, adds to the purple sectors. Purple in that middle sector as well now, looking very neat and tidy. There is Max as he goes through this fast double, triple, you could say, right-hander coming to the close of the lap, then through turn 19, just about keeps it within track limits, but he's lost one of those middle sectors, as that's Charles Leclerc.
But Leclerc is right up on him in the middle sector. They're neck and neck through 2 sectors. Verstappen crosses the line. It's a 1:35.0. It's actually slower than he managed in Q2 by just a couple of hundredths. He opens the door for the challengers. Here's Charles Leclerc. 1 corner to go. Down the gears, down to 3rd. Accelerating his way towards the line. Loves a sprint race, Charles Leclerc, and he's on provisional pole position. 2.5 tenths clear of Verstappen. He hooked up the final sector as well. Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris now comes through in 3rd. He's the full 9 tenths down on Charles Leclerc. What about Hamilton, and what about Carlos Sainz? Sainz finishing his lap right now, out of the final corner, maximising the track width, but it's nice. And Sainz goes to 3rd position, 1 tenth down on Verstappen. Can't help but feel like there's something more in there for Max with the gap that he's got to Leclerc out front. The sound you can hear is Oscar Piastri now driving to line in the other McLaren. He's 0.5 tenth down on Norris. The McLaren's 4th and 5th of 5 cars to come through so far. What is Hamilton doing? He's a 10th down on Verstappen in the first sector. He's right there with Leclerc's time.
Yeah, so he's struggled. We've seen him blitzing, haven't we, the first, certainly the middle sector, so he's not had a strong, spoke too soon, there we go, purple in the middle sector is Lewis Hamilton, so he'll be hoping to continue that. They've dropped off a little bit in the final sector, but George Russell now is crossing the line. Where's that going to put him up to? Only 5th place.
Hamilton is the man who can take provisional pole from Charles Leclerc. He's up through 2 sectors. Sergio Perez crosses the line, goes 5th. He's 7 tenths down on Leclerc. He's 5 tenths down on his teammate. But what about Hamilton now? Exits the final corner. He's the fastest man in the middle sector. He drives to the line. He goes 2nd, 0.5 tenth down on Charles Leclerc, who is provisional pole halfway through Q3. We've got 6.5 minutes left on the clock. They will come to the pits and they will do it again. And as it stands, Verstappen isn't even on the front row.
Say that again.
When was Singapore was the last time that happened?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't expect to see Verstappen there. He certainly will be very disappointed. He's now getting wheeled back into the garage, 2.5 tenths off Charles Leclerc, but that's going to be close. And it's going to be interesting to see who can extract a little bit more time in this final run. They're only going to get one more run, but it's a good effort as well from Pierre Gasly. He's there in 5th.
Yeah, great job from Gasly. That's going to be a standout result for Alpine after their recent run of form.
Well done there. 1% in the last corner.
Verstappen on the warpath on the radio, and it was his teammate that he was complaining about. Perez was lining up a lap as Verstappen was closing it there, but I don't think...
really blocking him?
No, that's just him being, well, I don't know what the best word to describe that is.
Frustrated.
Yes, I think so.
He was nearly half the length between the two corners ahead of him, wasn't he?
I think when it's your teammate, you get an extra sense of they really have to have the communication to be clear, but there's no way that was a quarter of a second there that Verstappen was held back, and that's what he needs to get onto terms with Leclerc. He's 2 tenths down on Hamilton as well, so it's a Ferrari and a Mercedes separated by half a tenth. The other Mercedes of George Russell had his lap time deleted for track limits. That would have put him 7th. He falls down to 10th without a time on the board. There are 5 minutes to go in the session, so a few minutes for everyone to have a breather, try and find a bit of lap time. But the way that there's a half a second gap between the two Red Bulls as well, you'd have thought Perez would be closer if Max had left a lot more time on the table, but half a second away. Perez down in 6th. He doesn't look particularly happy either.
No, and it's in the case of Hamilton, it looks like he's really feeling the car. What can he get away with through each sector with the tyres in terms of overheating them, having enough life in them? And it felt like on that lap it edged that bit closer to the perfect balance between the three. And you can see Leclerc doing the same thing too. He wasn't especially quick in the first sector, but suddenly came alive in the second and third sectors. It's all about tyre overheating around a long lap, as we were discussing, and managing the sort of life you have in those tyres, as we see Verstappen going out for what looks like an early run in this final part of the session.
Sainz will lead him out of the pit lane. Looks like it's Sainz and then Verstappen. There's actually a couple of cars further up as well, maybe the McLaren duo that have gone. Replay of Russell going over track limits here.
Yeah, it's coming into turn 9. Let's have a little look. So I'd say it's just about in. I mean, it's popping up on our screen track limits, but I would say that's pretty close.
It was microscope territory, wasn't it? It was tough, but I have to say, you can question the stewards on some things, but they're normally right when you get the microscope out for the track limits, and it was so marginal. I think that's the first one we've seen at turn 9 as well. But it wasn't a standout lap from Russell anyway. Would have been 7th with his teammate. Staring at a front row if he can put in this final lap. Verstappen trundling out of the pit lane now. So it is Leclerc, the first car out on circuit. Provisional poleman with Norris just behind him. Then it's Sainz, then it's Verstappen. 4 cars out, 3 minutes left on the clock. Hamilton waits. Gasly, Perez and Russell still sitting there in the garage. They have gone quite early, these first cars.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking that. And Max has that's a long. He was very slow going out of the pit lane. He's left a really big gap to the car in front. So I wonder if Red Bull will change how they're going to fire out Perez in this next session after Max's words on the radio. Signs is the sound you can hear. They're all very gentle, aren't they, bringing their tyres in, because it's still very hot out there. Track temperature is 40 degrees, air temp is 35 degrees. So they're just trying to make sure that they bring in the tyres the correct way, and that is, in any category, is really crucial.
I haven't seen a qualifying like this for a while. You get maybe 1 or 2 in the year where the tyres are struggling to make one complete lap before they're dropping away. And Verstappen, interestingly, was a tenth and a half up in the first sector on that last lap, and then he lost a lot of pace through the middle and the final corner. Had a moan at his teammate over the radio for the final corner, but there will be no investigation needed for that one, I don't think. Perez looked to be clear. Verstappen venting his anger, but maybe the grip just going away from him. He is crawling around this outlap. Now he's down at turn 15 as Charles Leclerc winds it up then for the final lap. Up the hill towards the first corner. Big Red, it is named, one of 2 named corners around here, and Leclerc is through there neatly and tidily, and he's already improving marginally as he comes flat out through turn 2 already now into the fast corners. Full commitment needed. Flat through 3, flat through 4. Slow it down slightly through 5, 6 and 7. And Leclerc is a 10.5 up on his own best time. He's right there with Verstappen's previous best first sector now. So Leclerc's finding time in the areas he needs to. Verstappen now winding it up now, and he's locked up at the first corner. He's gone wide, missed the apex by about a car's width.
I reckon that's cost him. You could see sparks were flying as he was entering into turn 1, heavy on the brakes. But he's run pretty wide, hasn't he, Jolyon?
The man that has barely put a foot wrong this year. He's won almost everything. He's missed 3 race wins all season, but he's under pressure here for a front row on the grid. The Grand Prix on Sunday will be a different thing. Red Bull's race pace is always their greatest strength, but they might need it. Verstappen hasn't improved in the first sector. Leclerc now 2/10 up through 2 sectors. He's piecing it together as he weaves down towards turn 15. Charles Leclerc, pole sitter in Baku, pole for the sprint in Baku as well, the first sprint race of the season, now at the penultimate sprint race of the season. 5 races left to go, and he's a little bit wide at turn 19. 1 corner to go. He had to hesitate for the throttle there, Charles Leclerc. His own personal best benchmark to bear down on. Leclerc, he chips away at it. He's into the 1 minute 34.7s. He's got a 10.5 to Hamilton. The Ferrari crew like it, but everyone else will have a go. Norris up to second place. Where did that come from for Lando Norris? 1/10 down. Verstappen flat out now through the quadruple apex. 16, 17, 18. Into the penultimate corner. He's off track limits as well, so it won't count for Max Verstappen, I'm sure of that. At the penultimate corner, it's going wrong for him, and he's shuffled down to 5th now with Sainz up to 4th. He goes provisionally to the top of the times. It might be pole position for Verstappen, but I don't think it'll count. He looked like he was over track limits. What about Lewis Hamilton, Alice?
Yeah, it's very, very close. Hamilton doing a great job in that first sector, but I agree with you. I don't think Verstappen will keep that lap time, but Hamilton, a personal best in that first sector, not quite matching Max Verstappen, but it's gonna be close.
Lap time deleted for Verstappen. Leclerc is back on provisional pole. Verstappen slips down. He's not even on the second row in this Grand Prix. And Hamilton is 200ths down on Verstappen's time, but that goes. He's going to be neck and neck with Charles Leclerc into the final sector. Leclerc at the moment, provisional pole. Norris there on the front row. Hamilton in 3rd. Can he improve on it? Can he get his Mercedes on the front row or even pole position? 2 corners to go for Lewis Hamilton. Flashes through 19. Perfectly within track limits on the exit. 1 corner to go. It's been a bit of a bogey corner, the final corner for the Mercedes man. Now he drives to the line, and Hamilton doesn't find enough time. Doesn't find enough. It's going to be Leclerc on pole position in the Ferrari. His 2nd pole on the year, unless George Russell could do something spectacular, which he does not. 5th for Russell. It's Leclerc on pole from Lando Norris, and Lewis Hamilton within a 10.5, but he's only in 3rd position. A super tight qualifying, but it's all smiles and pats on the back of Ferrari.
Wow, who would have thought that we would have that top 5, let alone that top 6 from Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, Sainz and Russell. But a great job by Charles Leclerc, who strung it all together. Lewis Hamilton didn't even set a personal best in that middle sector, but a great job from those that did. And like you said, Norris, where did that come from? He really sprang up to there, and we just hear the sound you can hear now is Max Verstappen. We're getting a replay of him coming through 19. I mean, that is, again, that's Microsoft. That is close.
It was. Max, that lap time is deleted for limits at turn 19. Would have been P1. It is P6.
That's a costly error from Verstappen. It
Definitely
definitely was. About an inch in it. God, please, I called that a racing speed. It was pretty marginal, but it would have been good enough for pole. 5 thousandths up on Leclerc. As it is, Leclerc takes the spoils today, and Verstappen is only 6th. Red Bull 6th and 9th. Big shot today, and we might have a really cracking Grand Prix on our hands on Sunday.
Yeah, I think it will. But we don't really know. Of course, I think that's the beauty from the sprint race weekends, is we don't actually know where everybody's sort of race pace is. We know Red Bull, throughout the whole year, they've been very, very strong on that race pace. But the car looks a little bit tough to drive this weekend.
And they will have some overtaking to do to get to the front as well. The field looks so close. Leclerc out of the car, waving to the crowd. All smiles from Fred Vasseur as well. And he's taken a 3rd pole for Ferrari this season. Sainz has been there already. 4th pole even. Sainz has had 2. Now Leclerc has 2. And a cracking job. Such a tight qualifying, but Charles Leclerc looks back to his best in Austin. Pole position, all smiles. Norris and Hamilton rounding out the top 3. Sainz 4th, Russell 5th, Verstappen 6th. Great job from Alpine to be 7th and 8th. Gasly ahead of Ocon. Then Perez improving, but only 9th position. 4/10 down on poleman Charles Leclerc. And then Oscar Piastri, star last time out, only 10th this time, with his teammate up in 2nd. Dramatic qualifying session that was. And we're going to hear from the top 3 now with James Hinchcliffe.
Charles Leclerc, 21st pole position here in Formula One. You seem to really excel on these sprint weekend formats. What is it about this format you love so much?
I don't know. I think as a team we did a great job. I mean, we know that in this sprint weekend it's more important than ever to have a clean FP1. We had a good FP1. We started with a strong basics thanks to the work the guys have done to prepare this weekend, with the car straight away feeling good. And then I was feeling good, and the lap, I was happy throughout qualifying. The last lap in Q3 there was a bit of mistakes here and there, but I think it wasn't easy for everybody. So really happy we're starting on pole for Sunday.
Obviously pole, best seat in the house for the start tomorrow, but at the same time we've seen even pole position is not immune to the chaos here at this very inviting turn 1. Are you thinking about that at all going into the start after what happened to Carlos last year?
I mean, of course, into turn 1 it's always tricky here, but at the same time it's always better to be starting in the front rather than being in the pack. So I'm really happy, and I love this track. I love the vibe that there is around this track in the city and in the country. So it's great to be here.
America loves Ferrari. They love Charles Leclerc. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So that turnaround in form for McLaren continues. You said before the weekend that this track might not suit you guys the same way that we saw in Japan or we saw in Qatar, but it doesn't seem to have slowed you down at all. P2.
I'm happy. It's been a good day. Like you said, probably not expected from the end result, so a good bonus for the whole team. Didn't make as many mistakes as I made last week, which is a good thing, but I think we had it today. I think there was enough in it to get pole. I know Charles said he made a few mistakes, but so did I. So it's a bit of a shame. That one opportunity, maybe we missed again, but I'm so happy nevertheless.
Now you're starting maybe not on the clean side of the racetrack, but turn 1 here, very wide. We've seen a lot of action into turn 1. In fact, I think P2 leads out of turn 1 and over that first lap more often than not. So we going for it in turn 1, trying to take the lead?
I am. I mean, it's different every year, but like you said, it's you never know. It's always a thing here in COTA. You never know what can happen. But we're in a good position. Charles is normally a good starter, to be honest, so it's going to be difficult to get him off the line. But we're in almost the best position you could have for Sunday, so I'm happy with that.
Still got to get through the sprint, but going for 4 podiums in a row on Sunday. Congratulations.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
How you guys doing? Lewis, you seem to just love racing in the States. You've only been off the podium once here in Austin. What is it about this place that you love so much?
I love being in the States. Look at this weather we've got. It's such a beautiful country, and this circuit is just incredible. It's one of the drivers' favorites, definitely one of my favorites. This is right up there with Silverstone. It really is a legendary layout that I think every driver finds really tricky. It's bumpy, incredibly challenging each section. So these guys, I have to say a big thank you to everyone back at the factory. They've been pushing so hard to improve our car, and we have taken a bit of a step closer to these guys this weekend, which I know everyone's working so hard for. So I really do appreciate all the efforts, and unfortunately they're still a little bit ahead, but we'll give it another shot tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, these updates really seem to be working, so huge credit to the team for all the progress that they've made. Now, this race has never been won in 10 years from off the front row, but with those upgrades, with the pace that you've shown in practice, you guys think you can be the first ones to take home that W from row 2?
I mean, I'll give it my best shot. for sure. And with this crowd, I think anything's possible, so we'll give it a go.
Absolutely. I'm sure they'd love to see the next win on the calendar. There you go, bud. Best of luck.
Thank you.
James Hinchcliffe, former IndyCar driver, asking the questions to your top three from that qualifying session. And it was Charles Leclerc beating Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. So Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes. Guys, do we then expect a copy-paste repeat for tomorrow in the sprint shootout?
Bank on it. I would not bank on it with how close that was. Verstappen's going to be back in the mix, and we know what happens when he has a loss. He comes back fighting. I'm just excited we got a cracking Grand Prix on our hands for Sunday. Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes in the top three, and Red Bull charging through from sixth.
Absolutely, lots to look out for, and of course Alpine in the mix as well, P7 and P8 for Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon respectively. Lots to look out for, but of course we have to put this result on ice because this is for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Tomorrow we have the sprint shootout and the sprint. The sprint shootout starts at 6:30 and then 11 p.m. is the start of the sprint. Thank you to Andrew Benson, Alice Powell, Jolyon Palmer-Ali commentated this weekend. Join us on 5 Sports Extra or the BBC Sport website tomorrow.